I supported the purchase of Clermont, and that caused a bit of consternation among some of my deputies. Why should the constable of the most densely populated parish, a third of the population, a lot of the business, most of the traffic, support the purchase of Clermont? If there's money going around, why don't we spend it on, for example, restoring Fort Regent, which still languishes, and I know is a theme of this week. So, in answer, I suppose, I would say simply this, that I fundamentally believe, and I have made this argument many times over the last 15 years, that one of the advantages of concentrating development in the urban areas is that it not only leaves the natural part of the island, like Clermont, relatively natural and protected, but it makes our urban areas make more sense. It's actually much better to live in a busy, vibrant, active town where lots of people are living and bringing up their families than to live in a suburb where you don't see people very often. And there is the quid pro quo that sustainable development, approved in the strategic plan, approved in successive island plans, allows the natural part of Jersey to continue to be natural and to continue to attract people to our shores. The economic benefits of Clermont perhaps weren't stressed enough. Undeveloped would be enormous if that happens. Obviously, if it's developed, there'll be a one-off set of receipts for the builders and the developers, but if it's kept undeveloped for tourism and for the kind of tourists who come to Jersey because they enjoy our north coast, it will go on benefiting the island for years. And as a town dweller, I have the right, I think, to enjoy the natural beauty of the unspoiled northwest coast. I want to enjoy it. I want my children and their children to be able to enjoy it. And I want the area of unspoiled Jersey to be as large as possible. To finish on Clermont, if I may quote another bit of Hopkins, and I quoted this in the States debate, but it fell on deaf ears. Let them be left, oh let them be left, wildness and wet. Long live the weeds and the wilderness yet. So just to recap, the reason why St Helier Council is fighting to preserve the lovely urban rural parishes is because St Helier residents and St Helier and St Clement and other town dwellers, if they're going to bear the brunt of development, they want to be able to access countryside at the weekends and in the evenings, on evenings like this perhaps, rather than being in the town hall for a lecture. One of the more extraordinary comments made by a States member was made by one of the St Helier deputies, and she said, that narrows it down a bit, I can't do the accent. She said, someone phoned her up and said, it's not fair, we have this blot on the landscape in St Warren. And she said, I'm driving in and I think, you might be right, mate, but we have another blot on the landscape, and it's called St Helier, and I'm not proud of it, and I represent it. That was a pretty extraordinary statement from a parish representative, but like so many things that people say in the States, because we have such a tame media, it wasn't picked up. Do I think St Helier is a blot on the landscape? No, I don't. I think it has got wonderful things to recommend it. But is the minister right in his aspiration that it is the place of choice for living? That's the big question. And I'm going to move on, if I may, from that. Just as an aside, really, and it's a matter that comes up in the island plan, and it's to do with traffic and travel. Now, living in town, we don't need a car to commute to work, but we do need a car to enjoy the wonderful unspoiled coastline, the valleys, the national park, and so on. But we in town are playing a significant part in safeguarding. So I think it's completely wrong in the island plan and in the sustainable transport policy to demonise car ownership. That may sound surprising because people think I hate cars. On page 305 of the plan, it says of residence parking schemes can prevent unnecessary trips, but they need to be introduced and administered with care so as not to encourage car ownership. I see. So living in town, we can't have a car, but if I live in St Mary's, I can. That's not fair. It's perhaps an obvious point to make, but it's not car ownership that is the problem, it's car use. And in terms of the air quality that afflicts residents on all the arterial routes of the island, not just St Helier, of course. And those are often the least well off, who live on, you wouldn't choose to live on Route Guyon, would you? If you could live in a nice leafy valley. And so the air quality issue is very important when it comes to selling town living. But there's also, of course, the physical impact of an increasing number of cars that is one of the obvious deleterious effects of an increasing population. Zero-emission cars, even if we all had zero-emission cars, they're just as fatal to the cyclist or the pedestrian if they're struck at more than 30 miles an hour. And they're quieter, which makes them even more problematic. So air quality is important, but even if we deal with it, we're still left with the problem of an enormous number of cars being used around the island. And so I do agree with the island plan that the commute and the school run need to be tackled if the experience of driving is to remain enjoyable. I enjoy driving. I enjoy driving out to the west and out to the east and the north. I enjoy driving to see my boat and so on, and to collect my kids. But I do think that the other stuff, the commute and the school run, do need to be tackled. And personally, and again, it fell out of this island plan, it was in the previous one. I think we need to look again at mass transit, because as the population of the island inexorably rises, and as car numbers build up, the bus service, however hard we try, is not going to be an acceptable alternative for some people. I suppose partly because when you're on the bus, you get stuck in the same traffic as the car drivers. But if you could sail overhead on a modern monorail from St Helier and out to Gorey, how good would that be? And that would be a very classy way to go to work and to go to school. So I hope that we will start looking again at mass transit, because we've all been to these schemes, Croydon, Boston, you've been on them, they're great, they work. They work in a way that sitting on Connex or what's it called now? Liberty bus. It's just not the same in the morning when you're stuck in the traffic. The risk of being even more controversial, because I'm sure you'd like me to be. Heritage. I've got to tackle this next. When I started in the States, the first thing I remember doing was going on a Columbury House march. And I can see that pretty soon, a lot older and with less hair, I'll be going on a Demarrick Street or Pitt Street or Co-op march. And one of the things we're missing, although it's been partly corrected in the last couple of days in the JP, is that regeneration, certainly in this island plan, is inexorably linked with the regeneration of historic buildings. It's not about knocking them down and building something new, and that creates regeneration. It's actually about taking old, defunct buildings and knitting them into new development in a way that is exciting, that attracts tourists, that attracts shoppers, and actually is a lot more interesting than simply building something out of steel and glass. As you will know, I've got involved in the co-op debate. Whether my proposition was a good idea or a bad idea remains to be seen. But I have had some history and some interest in the application that's been determined on Thursday. One of my first actions when I became Constable in 2001 was to persuade the St Helier Roads Committee that if we allowed the co-op to unload in Pitt Street, it wouldn't be necessary for them to knock a great big hole in the gable wall of the end building where the HMV logo is. And that worked for some time. The co-op didn't then resubmit very quickly plans, and I think it's a shame they didn't. I think the wanton destruction of St Helier's built heritage in the post-war years, we didn't need to be bombed like Dresden and Coventry, because we've done it ourselves. And Umbria Ferrari's two, frankly, heartbreaking books document that destruction, which has been every bit as successful as a blitz. You would think given the recent successful repair of 16 New Street, visited last year by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who cares about such matters, that the co-op will be pulling out the stops to find a way to regenerate their site without knocking it down. And you would have thought that the application subcommittee, who I believe visited the site today, or was scheduled to, and they're due to decide the future of these crucial buildings in 48 hours' time, would have paid some attention to the New Island plan, which I started off by mentioning. And it occurs to me that if they give consent to demolish, what will they do about all those people's applications to change their windows? Because it would seem a little odd to stop me in my 1830 Georgian house changing my wooden windows when the co-op has just been swept away. I'm not going to read, I've got it all here, but all I will say is that the references in the island plan to the importance of heritage are legion, and they're extremely powerful and extremely compelling. And I'll certainly be mugging up on these before Thursday's application subcommittee hearing. But what they really emphasise is that you can't use the economic argument to justify knocking down the co-op buildings, because the economic argument of keeping them is much stronger. It costs less, and it delivers more profit, because, as I've mentioned tourists before, and tourists are important to St Helier. Tourists will come to this part of town to see what imaginative use has been made, imaginative reuse has been made of these buildings. They won't come to this corner of town if it's just another high street, UK high street type effect. So the historic environment, as it says in the island plan, is a finite resource and an irreplaceable asset, and we need to protect it.